Welcome back to the award-winning Lead Pitch Live on Fox 4. We continue our conversation with the candidate for the Florida State House, District 26, Percy Williamson. And District 26 is more so Volusia County, which includes Daytona. And he joined us here in the Delray Beach area, which he has a intimate relationship from some of the great things he had influence on during his days as a bank vice president. Let's continue to talk to this rising star, Percy Williamson. Welcome back, man, to the conversation.
Good to be back. Good to see you, young man.
Tell you, I'm enjoying the conversation. I knew you, but I'm learning so much about you now. Tell me, how is it for you to sit here and reminisce and reveal a lot of things about your personal life?
Well, it's sort of.
I never heard you really talk about it that much.
I know. You know what? It's autobiographical for me, and one of the things that I had to learn to do, particularly when I'm running for office, is to share some of my early years and some of my life with the voters, so they can understand, the views that I have and how I basically grew into those views, and I'm just not winging it. This is something that's in my DNA. And so sharing, a lot of the things that have happened to me in my life gives some context to those viewers and voters about who I am and what drives me.
Mm-hmm. When people, as we get into your career, when people realize some of the things that you have accomplished and things that you've done in life, one of the things that they're going to take away from this is that you just don't stop, man.
Well, that's it. Listen, that's the athletic part of me. Where from the way I was raised and how I approach things, there's always an after this. I mean, when you graduate from college, there's an after this, and when you go to a particular profession and you retire from there, there's an after this. And so, for those Christians out there, we know that there's an ultimate after this, and that's called Calvary. Mm-hmm. But we'll talk about that another day.
Okay. And after this, man, I love your enthusiasm, the fact that you continue to reach, and throughout, even now, your reaching process has always been to better people around you.
And that's what public service is all about. My wife asked me, did you fall and hit your head when I told her I would run for public office? And she said, isn't that a dirty, nasty, dirty profession? And I said, if we just left it to other people, we would have no room to complain. And so with all the knowledge and experience, both public and private sector that I have, I feel like I have something to offer. Mm-hmm. And you got to have some folks who have the people's interest at heart in government. And stand up and speak for those people who doesn't have a voice. Speak for those young people who can't vote, mm-hmm. But yet and still need our mentorship and our supervision.
I was talking to a couple the other day, and I said, "What do you guys regret about Percy Williams running for state representative?" And they said, the only thing we regret, this is a wonderful couple and their family, the only thing we regret is they didn't do it earlier.
You know what? Listen, that's funny that you mentioned that, because truth be known, if I wanted to be a career politician or have a career in politics, I would have done this 10 years ago.
That's right.
And so that wasn't my desire. I felt like where I was and what I was doing was helping the community. And it's a long story, but when I came to Daytona Beach, I only intended to stay 3 years. And I came at the invitation of someone. I wanted to help them out, give some service, and then 3 years later, I was going to go on and do something else. But as God and faith would have it, there was a lot of things that I found that needed to be done, and I wanted to give back to my community. And 14 years later is when I retired, when I originally said I was only going to be there 3 years.
But as we get into your career, those things that you say, if you had gone into politics 10, 15 years earlier, mm-hmm. those things that you did in that 10, 15 years, from reading your bio and looking at the things that you've done, that we'll get into some in this particular segment, those things actually made you even a better candidate and a wiser person and a more experienced person in the type of capacity that you would be as a state rep, would you say?
Absolutely, 100%. You get the background and experience just by doing and experiencing certain things, and I think that all things happen in its own place and time. And now that I have had all this experience in dealing with a lot of different people in government, it just makes me a better person. So when I get to Tallahassee, I don't have a learning curve. I'm already there.
So you graduate from Bethune-Cookman College on time, and then what happens? Tell us how you got into your first job.
Well,
and what it was.
Of course, you know, I'm a man in a hurry, and so one of the things I did not mention was that I'm an avid reader. When I was growing up, we didn't have many gadgets or toys or anything. Aren't you happy that you didn't grow up when you know, being online and the computer age was? You'd have missed out on a lot of stuff, and I'm happy that I didn't grow up in this day and age.
Okay.
But during that time, reading was the only thing that I had to entertain myself. Love comic books. So all these movies that are out about DC and Marvel and all those comic, I know all those stories because I got a book every week. So I was an avid reader, and comic books started out, and I progressed from comic books on to short stories and the like. And so I read a lot. And one of the things that I read about was the various places around the country that fascinated me. And one of the places that fascinated me the most was New Orleans, Louisiana.
New Orleans.
Yeah, that's right.
Love that
the
gumbo.
Crescent City.
Love that gumbo, bro.
Gumbo, jazz.
Yeah,
listen,
man.
So when I graduated from Bethune-Cookman,
New Orleans.
I decided I needed a break. It'd been 12 years and then 4 years in college. I'd take a week or two before I decided I'd jump into the workaday world.
Okay.
So I took a trip to New Orleans. I had enough money to last 5 days. In day number three, it was very evident to me at that point that this is where I wanted to be.
Really?
And so by day 5, I had a job.
In New Orleans.
In New Orleans. My first job was as a assistant store manager for Walgreens department store on the corner of Canal and Royal Street in the French Quarter.
All right. Okay.
So
what year are we talking about?
We're talking about 1978.
All right.
The summer of '78, right following my graduation. And so that's how I got to New Orleans, and a fabulous place. I love New Orleans. I'd probably still be there. Except for in the late 70s, early 80s, that's when the oil industry crashed. Okay. We had gas lines. You're old enough to remember that. The state of Louisiana, Texas, and Oklahoma, since they were heavily involved in the oil industry, crashed. And it was a very difficult place to be. And I lived there for 5 years. And at that point, I decided I'd find another location based on the economy.
Okay.
But to this day, I still have friends in New Orleans. It's still one of my most favorite places in the entire world. And they basically remade themselves. They're primarily a tourist mecca now. And of course, the sadness of Katrina was a big concern of mine. A lot of my friends left New Orleans because they said they weren't going to come back until they fixed the levees to be able to withstand a Category 5 hurricane, which I think it covers a 3 now. But I consider New Orleans as one of my hometowns.
Okay. Now, exiting New Orleans, you head back to Daytona?
Well, while I was in New Orleans, I worked for Walgreens for 6 months, and then jumped over into my profession, which I had gone to college for. That was banking and finance.
Okay.
And so I got into the mortgage and finance business and banking, and
ground level,
and did some things. Progressed
those days
through that, and learned the craft. And
remember the name of the bank?
It was Bank of New Orleans.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was wonderful for that learning experience. And then when the crash came, I essentially take a look at the map of the United States, and I pretty much decided that I was either going to move to Atlanta, Charlotte, Jacksonville, Fort Lauderdale, or Tampa.
That's a lot of choices there.
Listen.
You were adventurous. Sound like you were pretty adventurous, though. You were young. You were single. You were just enjoying the world, taking risks.
Well, my second year from being in New Orleans is when I got married.
Okay.
To Carmen Oliver Williamson. We have been
The
married
lovely.
38 years, and we are the parents of 3 adult young men
Okay.
who are out of the house. So upon the decision that we're going to relocate, I did look at all those locations and ended up selecting Jacksonville, Florida for various reasons. It was the regional hub of banking and finance. It had 3 military bases there. It had a land mass that was growing and expanding, and so all of the economic dynamics were excellent. It was an hour and a half from Daytona, so people just couldn't drop over. And so I relocated in 1983 from New Orleans to Jacksonville, Florida.
Let's see, 83, I was in Jacksonville, like around 88, 89, 90. Were you there then?
I was there.
Okay,
Yeah,
we didn't even cross each other's paths.
I'm surprised because I was very involved in everything that happened in Jacksonville.
I was working at First Union and living in Bay Meadows. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. I lived in East Arlington and
Charles Griggs giving you a plug, man. You should have bumped into Percy. I know you knew Charles Griggs too.
Charles Griggs is working in publishing now.
Yeah.
He publishes a newspaper in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's an old banker as well.
Let me get you off track though. So you end up choosing Jacksonville.
Yes.
And you're working for whom in Jacksonville?
When I moved to Jacksonville, I started out with a home equity company called Credit Thrift, which I moved from there after 6 months to Sovereign Equity Mortgage, which eventually became Bank of America.
Well, you stayed in that banking field then.
Yeah.
Now you're on your way. You weren't a vice president yet. All right, what happens next? So you eventually become vice president at which bank? Bank of America?
Actually, I went to work for First Union, and First Union brought me in as an unassigned manager and assistant vice president. And to be honest with you, and these are some of the things that I say to young people who are not necessarily in a hurry, but have to recognize what their value is.
Okay.
And so at the time, I'm not hesitant to say that when I came in, they promised to place me within the first year. There were about, 6 or 7 opportunities for them to do that. They didn't do it. And so back at that time, and you're probably familiar with it, there was no stigma about moving around. You were expected to move around if you wanted to progress.
Okay.
And so a smaller community bank called my name and made me vice president and branch manager for one of their metro branches out in Bay Meadows, Beauclair, which is a very exclusive area. And I was right across the street from First Union's major metro banks. And so it's funny how things happen because I eventually made my way back to First Union at a higher position than I was when I left. So that's why you can't take no for an answer. You can't take no for an answer, and you can't let people dictate to you, what your aspirations is, particularly if you know that cream rises to the top.
That's right, man. Confidence and preparation. Preparation and opportunity meets, and then good things happen.
Well, it's funny that you say that because one of my heroes is Arthur Ashe. And Arthur Ashe had a fabulous saying. Arthur Ashe said, the primary key to success is self-confidence. And the key to self-confidence, preparation.
Wow.
So if you're self-confident and prepared, you can't be stopped.
Of course, that's Arthur Ashe, the late, great Arthur Ashe, tennis great. And educator along the way.
Yes.
A lot of admiration for Arthur Ashe as well. What would you say were some of your biggest success as a banker?
There was a lot of things that I was able to do during that time. As you know, in banking, it was always a big thing to be able to have lending authority. Mm-hmm. Because if you had lending authority, you could lend money up to what authority you were given. And I had $100,000 lending authority, which meant that I could make the decision on whoever came before me up to that amount.
Oh, that's nice.
And so the biggest problem that I saw that minority entrepreneurs had was that they didn't have access to capital. They could bid for a bigger job, or they could expand their business, but they couldn't get bank loans for some reason. And so
It's pretty interesting. A young brother having $100,000 lending limit, you can change a whole lot of things with that.
That's what happened. I had a number of small businesses who
Okay,
needed a
so
line of credit.
as you begin to talk about that,
Okay.
now you're working in you're in the lending, commercial lending.
I took over.
Business.
I took over the small business banking unit,
Okay.
which dealt with banks up to $10 million in assets and receivables,
Okay.
and managed that department. But this is after being in retail banking for some time, and then moved over into commercial lending, and then eventually into the business banking area. And when small business folks come to you and they have a good idea, they got a good track record, there shouldn't be any reason why they shouldn't be able to get a loan. But we know that things die very hard, and so somebody has to take a chance on a small business person, and that was the position I was in. And I'm happy to say that I believed in a lot of businesses and got them off into growing, adding jobs, and being integral parts of the community.
That is one of your most successful things in your banking career.
Yes.
I also know in your banking career that you got a chance to come down here in the Daytona Beach area and influence the economic growth of what we know as Atlantic Avenue. There's now a bustling business and commercial district there, that main street there leading up to past the railroad tracks. There was a development there that happened back in what was the 1990s that you were part of?
It was the late 90s, and it was Delray Beach on Atlantic Avenue. Atlantic Avenue went from I-95 down to the ocean.
That's correct.
And
Atlantic.
The
and it still does.
The area of Atlantic Avenue that we were looking at was the area that required some redevelopment. So it was having some difficult times, and Delray Beach at that time is not what it is now.
That was your CRA, community redevelopment area,
right.
census tract,
right,
enterprise zone, all the kind of things that said this is an area that needs a lot of improvement in government incentives along with the public sector
right.
and private sector. Go ahead.
And at that time, I was a state manager for Bank of America,
Okay.
which meant I was the state manager of the Community Development Finance Group, which managed projects with statewide responsibilities, managed projects from Pensacola to Key West and everything in between. So that gave me an opportunity to do business in the 67 counties of Florida, and gave me an opportunity to interact with cities and counties and municipalities to be able to get things done. So when I say I've already got the training, when I go to Tallahassee, I'm ready on the first day because I've been on both sides of the table. I've been on the private sector side of it, and then on the municipal side of it, to where I understand government, I understand how it works. And in coming to Delray, that was the very first project that was done to try to create a linchpin for the redevelopment of Delray. And I'll never forget the project. It's called Atlantic Grove, mixed use, mixed purpose building, where it has commercial on the bottom and residential on top. We had 15 partners involved, banks, nonprofits. We had LISC. We had for-profit developers, and I ran the project.
You were the point person
on it. We had the most money in it. And so the wonderful thing about it is we brought all of these groups and organizations that had different goals and aspirations for the project, brought them all in together. We had cities and we had the county. And Atlantic Grove, to be honest with you, was a catalyst for redevelopment on Atlantic Avenue in Delray. And when I go by there now and I see it, I just have to smile.
Yeah, I'm sure and you get a chance to see it while you're here in our community. And the community is indebted to you for your hard work, for your understanding that you could create jobs, economic development, stimulate the economy, bring in tax revenue with that Atlantic Grove project, and then people could also get housing. All of that has now catapulted itself into Atlantic Avenue being one of the bustling business districts and residential just off of Atlantic Avenue in the Delray Beach area. So we are indebted to you for your work back in the 90s down here.
Yeah, wonderful project, wonderful people to work with. One day I had to be Henry Kissinger as far as a diplomat is concerned, and then another day you had to be a mentor to a nonprofit who their goal in life was to get low-income families into affordable housing, which we set aside a percentage in that wonderful project, and I'm happy to say that those folks are still benefiting from it today.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things I want to hit on before we leave banking is you mentioned early on that you were in charge of the entire state in Bank of America for what you did, and you got a chance to go into the outhouses, the in houses, the upstairs and the downstairs, and you got a chance to kind of move through this wonderful state of Florida.
Yes.
As a state representative with that type of knowledge of the entire state, even though you will be representing District 16.
26. District 26.
District 26.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to get my notes right. The responsibility and focus on a district, does your knowledge of the entire state come to bear?
It absolutely does. Having a statewide reach and having an opportunity to interact with counties across this state gave me an opportunity to take ideas from different places. There's no shame in my game in taking good ideas in one place and transporting it back somewhere else. So I would take projects that took place in one part of the state, and let's see if we can, because what happens is when you take a project that's already been perfected, they've gotten all the kinks out of it, it's a lot easier for me to move it from the west side of the state to the east side of the state because all of the factors have been worked out, all the kinks have been worked out. And so I can draw on experiences from different parts of the state and have a focal point where I can call back and say, how's this project going? And what did you guys do when we first started out, with this or that? And so it gives you a point where you've got the personal experience to be able to collaborate and make things happen with a statewide reach, and that's why it's important for me to maintain these relationships that I've developed.
I would think that in your banking capacity too, that would serve you well. You can speak to this. I'm just a conscientious observer. I would think that in your banking capacity, dealing with numbers, financial statements, understanding cash flow, understanding budgets and things of that nature will be a big benefit to you in that job.
It's a tremendous benefit, and the budget is the primary thing. Everybody has a budget, and understanding the budget process, understanding the appropriation process, of which I do. The state of Florida has a $88 billion with a B dollar budget. And so if you go in with budgetary understanding and knowledge, then you're able to maneuver and operate a lot easier, and your learning curve is a lot easier when you understand how state budgets work.
Okay. Any disappointment, anything that in your career that you found that was disappointing as well?
One of the disappointments was in Jacksonville, we had an organization called Urban Bankers.
I remember that.
And Urban Bankers was set up for the more seasoned bankers to bring along the youngsters new to the field and put them on a path to where they could be successful. And unfortunately, that organization went defunct, and there's no organization out there like we had that held our hands and got us to the point where we can be top-notch professionals and be ready, substantively ready to move to the next level.
But if elected as a state rep, District 26, you wouldn't be opposed to working with organizations who will be looking to revitalize those types of organizations?
Not at all, not at all. And that's where my stand on education comes in. I know we haven't gotten to that part, but as I said, education is a great equalizer. And unfortunately, the state of Florida is not fully funding education. We're more interested in testing than direct instruction. And so with education being a great equalizer, we need to fully fund it. We need to pay our professional teachers like they should be paid. We need to stop sending unfunded mandates down to cities, and which basically cut the budget because you've given them a directive to do something, but you haven't given them any money. And we need to go back to vocational education. Everybody's not on a college track. And so vocational education is important. You know how much a plumber makes? An electrician makes?
I know, because I pay the bill.
Do you know how much a carpenter makes?
They get paid.
They get paid. And so there's a lot of, with the boom in the construction industry right now, they are short in those trades. And so, vocational education is something that we stopped funding, and I think we need to get back to it.
And that's a very good point. We're going to come back when we're going to talk to you some more about the public sector, municipal government, and all those types of things. We're having a conversation with Percy Williamson, a candidate for the Florida State Rep, District 26. He's right here on the award-winning Leap Pitch Live on Fox 4. And we'll be coming back to learn more about this rising political star.